Hi, Bayside. Welcome to Church at Home, January 1st, 2023. Happy New Year. Like, how great is that? You made it another year. I don't know why. That feels like an accomplishment. And looking forward to what this year has to offer. It's always something exciting about the new year, right? I mean, there's just something that comes with it. I mean, it's fascinating. Even like multiculturally, how many cultures celebrate a new year. There's a kind of that sense of longing for, belief in, hope of the future, right? That it's going to get better somehow. And it should, especially if you're a follower of Jesus. There should very much be a sense that, man, whatever this next year has, there is a better that's there, because it's not about what the country does or what the world does or even what your family does. It's about what you can do when it comes to Jesus, when it comes to faith, when it comes to growing, when it comes to changing. In fact, it's fun to think about, but it just struck me that, the idea of the new year, I mean, new is code for change, right? I mean, that's all that means, that the year's changing over. And change is that funny thing we have that great relationship with, right? It's complicated, and change isn't always our favorite thing, but new is almost always our favorite thing, at least as far as how it feels, right? A new car sounds great. Shoot, even a new toaster sounds pretty awesome, right? But new is always replacing something. And that's change. And even when there's something that's really good, like a new car or a new toaster or even just a new pair of jeans, right? You got that sense of like, man, these are great to have new ones. These jeans don't have holes in the knee, but they're not as soft and as supple as my old jeans. They're not worn in yet, right? You miss some things about the old, but man, you got to make the change into the new. Well, this year, I hope some of that change that you're thinking about, wanting, the new that you're looking forward to, is about your faith. It's about growing in your faith. It's about growing in your faith in Jesus and learning more about him, how to follow him more, because, it's like Jesus told his own disciples, I will be with you always to the very ends of the earth. And in fact, you could say that what Jesus means is it's going to be me with you that's going to get you to the very ends of the earth. That's a cool promise he has for us. But if we look back honestly at our 2022, has that been our experience with Jesus? Is our faith at that place where we're moving forward with him? It's like we talked about in kind of the time of 21 days of prayer and fasting. There's this sense of which faith isn't about how much you have. It's about where have you allocated it? Like, what are you resting it on? And there's a sense of which, when we have our faith rested on Jesus, Jesus is the thing that brings us comfort. He's the thing that brings us satisfaction. I mean, that's awesome when you have that, because he's always there to be with us. I was thinking about when Flavio came to stay with us at the beginning of the new year. Hi, Flavio. Hope you're watching this. Here's a guy who's, he was 16. He left his home, left his country, left the land where everybody speaks his first language, right? Left behind all the possible comforts of life to come to a new country, new city, a new family he's never even met, to stay in a new home, in a new bedroom where all he's got is a few goods he brought with him. That is a lot of new. And that's exciting. It's adventurous, but it's a lot of change. In fact, it's all change. But this is so interesting. Think about when he first came, like the second night that he was there, is the first night he cooked dinner for us. And you know what he cooked for us? He cooked his favorite meal, which was delicious. But I thought it's kind of brilliant. Like, what do we go to when we're in the land of change and discomfort and uncertainty? We go to what is familiar. I mean, it's like the definition of comfort food, right? That we go to. Now, I know food's a bad example. We're talking about getting ready to do some fasting here. But I love this picture because, the idea of faith, our faith in Jesus, is that Jesus is our comfort food. Like, that's not a weird stretch. Like, that's literally like the idea. He means to be that close to us, that when we prioritize our life, to put our trust in him first and foremost, that we find in him an immediate sense of there is a comfort of knowing we always have him. He's always with us. We're going to get to wherever he needs and wants us to get to. We're not going to be doing this thing alone, and it's always going to be connected to eternal purpose in our life. It's a cool thing. So we're going to jump right into this conversation on New Year, new change, and really how do we take some steps for our faith and the gifts that we're going to have to run with and do together. And so we're going to come to Matthew chapter 9, and I love this story because I hadn't thought about it from the standpoint of change, to be honest, until this week when I was thinking about but there's a lot of great change right here. And so Matthew 9, starting with verse 9, it says, as Jesus was walking along, he saw a man named Matthew sitting at his tax collector's booth. Follow me and be my disciple, Jesus said to him. So Matthew got up and followed him. Right, so Matthew, the guy that's been writing this gospel that we've been diving into, right? Matthew is here. He's working as a tax collector, which in their day and age meant that he was corrupt. I mean, he's basically very much in the legal profession. He works for the government, but it is a system that is just filled with corruption. And people want to become tax collectors because they're going to get rich. They're going to make bank. I mean, they get to tax people and they get to pad the taxes and they get to keep anything that they pad on top. And so they're hated by their culture and their community, but you know, rich people are used to being hated by middle class people. So like that's not anything new. And they got everything they want. They got all the comforts of life. They got the best things that money can buy. And here's Matthew, hard at work as a tax collector, and he's in the hometown of Jesus. He's in Capernaum, which is like his headquarters right now. It's not where Jesus' family's from, but it's what he's made his ministry headquarters. And this is a town and a place where Matthew this is not his first encounter with Jesus. He's in a small enough place where I'm sure he's heard about Jesus at the very least. He's probably gone even to see and hear Jesus firsthand to some degree. But he's definitely going to be aware of this guy. But I think it's fascinating to think about what is it like to look at from Matthew's perspective of what does this mean when Jesus says to him, come and follow me, be my disciple. Now we miss this because of the language dynamic, but in their culture, that was very much a phrase that when a Jewish rabbi, and that's what Jesus is, he's a Jewish rabbi, a religious teacher, says to someone, come and follow me, be my disciple, that is a very formal invitation to mean leave your life behind, your job, your career, and make this your new career. It's like saying, come and be my apprentice. And as my apprentice, you're going to learn how to be a rabbi by following me everywhere I go. Which means your whole life is changing. Your day-to-day operation of life is changing. And his career is changing, right? That's huge. Imagine if Jesus said to you, I want you to quit your job tomorrow and just follow me. I mean, one sense you might be like, it's great, I hate my job. But then you're going to start thinking practically like, okay, well, how much am I getting paid? Like, how am I going to afford all my expenses? I mean, this isn't just a job change. This is a huge lifestyle change for Matthew. And yet, he does it. I mean, he becomes a disciple who becomes the guy writing one of the Gospels about Jesus' life, all that he is an eyewitness to. But why does he do that? Because, I mean, I think in one sense, we look at the new year, and maybe you make resolutions, maybe you set goals, maybe you just have a vague sense of which you wish your life could be different, and you've tried things this last year, and maybe some of them work, maybe they didn't work, and you'd like to change. But how does he make this leap? How does he make this big jump of change? I mean, it's a huge change. But I think part of the answer is to understand that language, coming back to food, that Matthew had to be hungry for some kind of change in his life. It wasn't just random that Jesus is walking by and he responds. He knows what Jesus is asking. There's got to be a sense in which he's been thinking about this, processing this, wishing maybe that there was some way in which he could get closer to God, maybe wishing there was some way he could make a change in his life. He could go back even maybe before he was a tax collector. Maybe he could have a clear conscience again where he wouldn't have to like drown out his guilt, his regret, his shame with, at the very least, alcohol, partying. I mean, he's living the good life, but he's got baggage and he's hungry for something to change. And Jesus gives him that invitation. I think it's so cool to think that here's Matthew that goes, embraces it in a moment, walks away from his work, walks away from his job, walks away from his booth, and follows Jesus. And I read this last week. I like this a lot. There's a quote from John Piper. And it fits very well with this concept. This is his book, Desiring God. He says, if you don't feel strong desires for the manifestation of the glory of God, it's not because you've drunk deeply and are satisfied. It's because you have nibbled so long at the table of the world, your soul is stuffed with small things, and there is no room for the great. There's no room for the great. God did not create you for this. Now he's talking to people who are believers here, obviously, maybe, but he's just saying, look, all of us have, if we really want to know more about God, but we don't find ourselves very motivated. We don't find ourselves kind of ready to take next steps. We find ourselves just kind of settling into the status quo, and we're not thrilled by this idea that you can know the greatness of the God of the universe. I mean, seriously, the God who made you, who made this world, who can explain the mysteries of it all, that you can know him, and you're like, I mean, a little bit, maybe like once a week, a little bit of time, maybe I'll pray, maybe I'll think about it, maybe I'll read something, but it's not going to fit in like the big picture of my life. It's certainly not going to be the main thing in my life. He's got this great point. He's saying it's not because we've been satisfied by God. It's because we've been nibbling at the table of the world. That's all the stuff the world has to offer. All the great, fun things this world has to offer. All the hard, difficult, stressful things that this world also offers. Right? It's a combination of all these things, and we nibble and we bite and we find little bits of satisfaction and contentment. There's ways that we cope. There's comfort food. There's comfort behavior. Right? There's all the ways that we comfort ourselves from the worries and stress, and all the ways we comfort ourselves and distract ourselves. And he's saying that often is what distracts us from actually coming to God and discovering the sort of the meal, the satisfaction that comes. Remember what Jesus said? This is in the Sermon on the Mount. He said, "Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be satisfied." And righteousness means a right relationship with God. Jesus says that blessed are those that are hungering and thirsting for that right relationship with God. They're going to be satisfied. You can be satisfied. Saying that this is actually being offered to you. This isn't hypothetical. This isn't like for just super spiritual people somewhere. Like this is, he's talking to everyday, ordinary people. This can be you. This can be your new year. This can be 2023. It comes down to recognizing, what am I doing to my appetite? Am I ready? Am I willing? Am I wanting to really hunger for something that can truly satisfy, me, heart and soul and mind? Right? That's an awesome thing. Right? I need that in my life. It's like there's a question that we just ask, which is like, so what do we nibble on? I mean, what do you nibble on? What do you go to when you have a bad day? Like, what do you look to satisfy, to help kind of like calm down, to help kind of cope with? Like, what's your first thing that you run to? Food, substance, a person, social media, technology, TV, right? You name it. What is it though? What is it for you specifically? Like, what do you go to nibble on? What do you go to when you have a bad day? But what do you go to when you have a good day? You just had a great day. What do you run to first to celebrate that, to make that good day a little bit greater, a little bit better? Again, substance, TV, a friend, a person, technology, right? What do we go to in those moments of best and worst case scenarios in life? It tells us a lot about what are we nibbling on? What are we really relying on? What are we kind of putting our faith in? Like, this is what helps me get through life. This is what's helping me make sense of life. What helps me enjoy my life. And our challenge in this is to look at Jesus is saying, let that be him. Let that be coming to him. Let that be your experiencing God. You're experiencing a relationship with him. Let that be how you rechannel your faith into him. It's like if you've seen it at weddings, where they have like the whole like pyramid of, wine glasses or champagne glasses, right? And they start pouring at the top and it like trickles down and fills in the whole thing. He's not saying get rid of all those things out of your life. He's saying start at the top. Start with me. Let that be the point where you bring your best day to me. Let it be the point where you bring your worst day to me. Bring your stress, bring your worries, bring your cares, bring your concerns. In essence, this is what prayer is. It's just me really establishing what, I am trusting you. I'm asking you to go with me into my best moments and into my worst moments. It's not that I don't trust that I have skills or abilities or talents, right? Or that there's other good things in my life or good people, that these things don't have a great place. It's just that priority. It's that right order. I'm saying, I'm coming to you first because you bring the greatest satisfaction. You're going to bring more satisfaction to the best of things in my life, and you're going to bring the greatest comfort to the hardest things in my life. Jesus is putting that on the table. And the story of Matthew, I think, offers a really cool, vivid picture of this, because look what happens next. It says, later, Matthew invited Jesus and his disciples to his home as dinner guests, along with many tax collectors and other disreputable sinners. Right? This is such a great picture. But I love that this says Matthew invited. Like, he invites Jesus to his home. He invites Jesus to his life, his corrupt life. Right, his world of tax collector corruption, his wealthy guys that are all in the same boat, that are either tax collectors or disreputable sinners. Like, there's a nice variety there, possibilities. But he's saying all these people who are not the religious group of people, they're not the moral majority of anything, right? These are all these other people. But now Matthew was following Jesus, a righteous rabbi, a Jewish teacher of God's law. Right, these two worlds are colliding, and yet they're colliding by invitation. Right, and there's so many different aspects of this in our own life, but it's this cool picture of inviting Jesus into our life, into your home life, your work life, your family life, your relationship life, your finance life, your sex life, right? The whole thing, all of life. It's saying he wants to be a part of all of it. That's how he starts to become the first priority of life. We have to invite him into that. And when we talk about this idea of faith and praying first, it's just the first step of really inviting Jesus into our day, that we're putting our faith in him. And we're going to listen to him. We're going to follow him. We want to obey him, right? That's the ultimate idea. I like that Matthew is only doing this because he's got Jesus with him. Like, it's not a great idea to try to live out change with people who aren't trying to change around you, who have the same old bad habits. Like, that's a terrible idea, but I love that he's got Jesus with him. Proverbs 9:9 says this, I think this is fun. It says, instruct the wise, and they will be even wiser. Teach the righteous, and they will learn even more. Like, there's this posture amongst what should be a posture amongst followers of Jesus, is that we're teachable, that we want to learn. And that if we're wise, we're going to recognize that we need to learn more. That the wise instruct the wise, and they will be even wiser. Like once you start learning and looking at your life and going like, man, what do I really need to change? What do I need to get rid of? What was bad for me this last year? What harmed me in 2022? Harmed me or just kept me from being able to move forward, to grow, to become more than I am in ways I want to change, but now in ways that God wants me to change in my faith, in my spiritual life, like in all the ways that Jesus wants to talk about what life is really meant to look like. Teach the righteous, right? Those who want that relationship with God, and they will learn even more. There's this great sense of which there's so much more that God has for us. And he wants us. And Matthew was leaning into Jesus, even into bringing him into the craziness of what was his past, what was his normal. I mean, think of how corruption and partying and wealth and success, all this was just his normal, right? Whatever we might think about that in the real world when we saw it in real life, for Matthew, that was just his normal group, his normal sphere. It was his day in, day out. No matter how ultimately sick it made him, unsatisfied it made him. I mean, even no matter how sick he got of it, he had no way out, no what to do maybe. But now all of a sudden he's got this awesome change, and it's transforming his mindset and his ability to be able to see himself in a completely different light. I mean, how cool is that? And I love this, that this is what Jesus wants to do. And it's also what the church does. It's why we surround ourselves with each other. It's why we join life groups, right? It's why we get to know people so we can think, how do we take steps? How do we grow? Because we need people to help us make these steps and to grow and to go forward. Right, I was listening to Dr. Henry Cloud, a psychologist and teacher and coach in a lot of ways, but he was talking about one of his heroes. He's a golf fan, was Arnold Palmer, and he said, here's this guy who was a great. I mean, he's one of the legends of the golf world. And at some point, he was reading about him an interview where he had done poorly in some tournament, and he had gone back home and immediately met with his coach. And Cloud was like shocked a little bit to go like, what? He has a coach? Like, he's one of the greatest of all time kind of guys, and he has a coach? Like, why would he have a coach was his kind of initial reaction. And maybe we can all kind of think that way. Like, those people are just naturally good. They just have the talent. They just have the skill. But no, like some of the greatest, most successful people in the world have coaches. And as Cloud was saying, he does now consulting and coaching and counseling. He says, he's found that it's people who are the most successful in whatever he's coaching them on that are the ones who interact and come to him and ask him the most questions, that want the most advice, that want the most feedback. They want to know how they can continually improve, that they don't become great successes because they're just naturally successful. It's because they're constantly working at it. They're constantly evaluating. Because we all have this tendency just to kind of fit our little selves into our space and accept it is what it is and not want to think that we could be possibly responsible for changing what we do in our lives and our disciplines and our habits. And oftentimes we fail at making changes because we don't even know where to start or where to begin. But do we go looking for answers to those questions because we can find them? There's people around us that can help us say, we need that. And so I love this picture because this is that idea of like, man, if we want to be wise, the first part of wisdom is being willing to listen to trustworthy people who can help us get better at what it is we're trying to do, how to expand our faith, how to make Jesus first and foremost a priority in our life. Like that's a great posture that we can and should have. In fact, look at the example out of Matthew. Here's like the exact opposite. A group of people show up, the Pharisees. Verse 11, when the Pharisees saw this, they asked his disciples, why does your teacher eat with such scum? Like, this is the New Living Translation. I like how they just threw that out there, like scum. These corrupt people, we hate these guys. Like, they're just flat out scum. That's quality. When Jesus heard this, he said, healthy people don't need a doctor. Sick people do. I mean, how great is that? Here's Jesus' perspective. I'm not running around trying to judge people. I just am recognizing there's a lot of sick people. There's a lot of dysfunctional people. There's a lot of sinful people. There's a lot of broken people. Guess what? They're why I came. They're why I'm here. It's not a surprise. He's not offended. He's not angry about it. He's not even upset about it. He's like, I know. That's why I showed up. That's why doctors show up. Doctors show up where the sick people are. That's what you sign up for when you decide to become a doctor. I love that answer. He said, now go and learn the meaning of this scripture. I want you to show mercy, not offer sacrifices. For I have come to call not those who think they are righteous, but those who know they are sinners. And he throws a quotation out of the Old Testament of Hosea to them when he says that I want you to offer mercy, show mercy and not offer sacrifices. He means don't do just the religious things or just the rules and just what's required. At the core of what God wants and what God shows us is mercy. And what we need at the core of our being is mercy. Like think about that. They're being faced with this judgment, this criticism. Why would you be with these scummy failures and these betrayers and these corrupt people and they're just terrible, yada, yada. And Jesus is like, hey, the criticism doesn't do anybody any good. It's not helping anybody. It's not why I came. It's not why God came into this world. It's not why the Son of God showed up, was to bring criticism. He didn't have to do that. He shows up to bring mercy, to teach mercy, to demonstrate mercy, to live out mercy in his life. And ultimately, that's what his death is going to mean, is it's going to be about God's mercy. But I love that he doesn't just say, look for that from God, but ultimately, you need to receive it as well. Because, when you begin to understand your need for mercy, it changes how you judge others. It's meant to. That's where Jesus is going. That's what the church is meant to be defined by. Man, when I look at the mercy God has given me and I realize the judgment that I should have endured from God, it makes me want to extend that. It makes me realize I can't judge anybody else. God is extending the same mercy that he gave me, maybe for different actions or different lifestyle or something like that, but it doesn't matter. It's the same mercy. But this is also cool because when you accept this mercy, it doesn't just change how you judge others, it also can change how you judge yourself. Because you can have that attitude of like, I fear failure. I fear being an embarrassment, right? I fear, making this mistake, so I'm just going to quit. I'm not even going to try. Right? I'm going to give up. But that's the beauty of mercy. When you know that mercy is the possibility, there's a courage that comes into our life. There's a courage that says, maybe I should go forward. Maybe I should keep at this, right? Maybe this failure isn't totally final. But there's something else that's so key for us to understand, I think, to take home. And I think of this as from a New Year standpoint. If we're really going to make change and accept this, we also have to understand, where does our hostility, all this judgment, all this criticism really come from? In one sense, we'd like to think it's because these people. We see people around us messing things up, screwing stuff up, hurting people or making bad choices, making our life more difficult. And it's just easy to be critical, judgmental. Like, I can't believe they're doing that in this way, and people, and yada, yada. But the New Testament argues that the hostility in our hearts isn't really about people. It's not even about us. It's really about God. That the hostility we have towards God. That at its core, it's what it's about. Romans 8 puts it this way. Verse 7, it says, for the sinful nature is always hostile to God. It never did obey God's law, and it never will. Think about that. That's kind of a fascinating thing. The sinful nature, which is a way of saying that you and I, as people, naturally, we sin. We have a sinful nature. It's what we do. It's what we do automatically, right? It's why we're all really good at manipulation, trying to get our own way, and why we don't mind telling some lies occasionally to be able to get people to do things that we want to do or if it'll turn out in our benefit, right? There's things that just come naturally to us, and those things are part of the brokenness. They're part of the sinfulness, and it says that it makes us hostile to God. We don't like the idea that it's not about us, even though at some level, we're very aware of we're finite, maybe that we're small, that we're limited, and yet there's this infinite God, and there's still something in us that is hostile. It's like, why should it be all about God? Why should I have to do it his way? Why should I listen to him? Does he know how I feel? Does he know what it's like to be me, right? And the answer, because of Jesus, is, yeah, he does. He does know what it's like to be you. He knows what it's like to face the hardships and challenges and traumas of this life. That's why he came, was to take that on and to endure it. And this is important for us to recognize at the core of what is in our judgmental spirit, our harshness towards the world around us and towards ourselves, is really at the core of this hostility towards God, towards how life is meant to work, his law, the way the world is set up, with God at the very top of it, to putting him first, to find our life and the success of our life and the beauty of our life all through this lens of loving God with all of our heart, soul, mind, and strength. I've really seen our place as worship and coming before God to worship him and to embrace him in that way. Like, this is a very significant component piece. Because until we really recognize that this is what's at the core, we can't really embrace God's mercy. We can't fully see just how merciful he is. We don't really understand the greatness of this picture of Jesus going to the cross and dying for us and our sins. He's dying for our hostility. He's dying so that God himself doesn't take out his hostility towards us. He gives us mercy. It's the answer to the hostility of our heart. It's really where spiritual change begins. It's really where spiritual change has a chance to begin to form inside of us a whole different relationship with God, when we can begin to acknowledge, you know what, I have been hostile. I have thought God not worthy of my time, of my life. I have thought God not safe enough, good enough, great enough to give my life meaning and purpose, that I could give it to myself, that somehow I could find and define for myself what is the best way to live. And it's when we really recognize that that's not just like a disagreement, that's not just a difference of opinion, that is a deep-rooted hostility that we have towards God because of our sinful nature to want to be our own master, our own Lord. And when we lay that down and come to grips with that, we need God's mercy because of that. It changes us. Because the other side of that question is this, is why does God put up with me? As this tiny little human being and the infinite, God, why does he even put up with this hostility in us? And the answer is because he loves us. But more incredible than that is the how he puts up with us is by sending his son. Man, the more I see Jesus, the more I see him as the answer to what I get angry about with God, the more I see that this is his response to both my hostility and my sin, that what he's done to save me, that his demonstration of his love and his mercy, the more that mercy, the more I recognize it, man, the more that I want to be able to give that away. The more that becomes real to me, the more I realize, man, Jesus is the one that I can go to for my comfort when things are really hard and stressful and worrisome and full of anxiety. And who I want to go with to celebrate, man, God is just good. Life is just good. Great things have been happening. I'm blessed. He becomes the one that is the first and foremost, because I realize it all comes from him. And he's the one that sustains me. He's the one that satisfies my heart and soul like nothing else in this world can. And yet, the things in this world are great things. They're good things that he's made, and they're great secondary things. They're just not great primary things in our life. But this is just what is cool. When you own that, when you make that exchange with God and you receive his mercy for your hostility, that is where you do find that God means it when he says that his mercy is new every morning. Great is his faithfulness. That every day you get a second chance, which means every day is an opportunity to try something, to change, to step into the new, to grow, to move past yesterday's failures. Now that is a huge thing because it gives you a chance to learn, to be one of those wise people that says, I made a foolish mistake yesterday, but it doesn't have to define me today. That God is ultimately the God of second chances, and frankly, a lot of times third and fourths, right? Because most of us don't make change on the first try or successfully. But I love this. As we talk about the next 21 days about prayer and fasting, that this is just a simple way of saying, look, how do we take a next step? Let's make God the first part of our day. He's worth it. He's worthwhile. There's nothing better than him. There's no better way to start our day. And if we take this idea of prayer, that what we're doing is we're simply allocating what we're going to put our trust in first and foremost, and let it trickle down that fountain to the rest of our areas of our life, our work, our family, our kids, that meeting that we got to go to, that conflict that we got to resolve, right? The problems that we're facing. And we let him be the first thing, not the last resort, but the first person that we run to. When we really begin to make prayer that first part of our life, like that's what we're doing with these 21 days of prayer and fasting, is how do we really begin to make it so that, man, we're going to God first, that first meal, that first form of comfort, that first thing that we're looking forward to help us, to strengthen us, prepare us for what the day is going to throw at us. It all just begins with the little step. We're talking, maybe that's 5 minutes, maybe that's 10 minutes, 5 minutes of prayer and 5 minutes of reading God's word. But to begin with that kind of simplicity and that kind of step. And I hope this morning, as we kind of think about that for this new year, that this is just an idea that we don't take and go grandiose, go like, oh man, I got to totally do this. I'm going to change my life. I'm quitting my job and be like Matthew. Like, don't go that big. Start small. This is about building your life on small things. Like Matthew's life didn't change in one day. I mean, it changed a lot in one day, but he didn't become the guy writing the gospel all in one day. And we'll track with those disciples as we see their own process of growing and developing. And it's a process. And so we're in that same process. But I like this quote from Jim Rohn. It says, look, success is nothing more than a few simple disciplines practiced every day. Success is nothing more than a few simple disciplines practiced every day. That is a great way to think of it. What are the simple things that we can begin to build in? Because this is what's cool. When you just begin to build Jesus in as the first thing you're going to go to in any given day, When we begin to let that become a part of our thinking, becomes part of our habit, you wake up in the morning and your first thoughts start like, okay, Jesus, this is your day. I want to hand it over to you. And we begin that process of thinking through, where are we going and what are we doing? I want this to be your day. I want to be your person. I want to live this out. It has implications and ramifications that trickle into all these other aspects of our life. And we learn that it's not just a once a day thing. It becomes a first thing before any meeting, before any rough moment, before any great aspect, right? It becomes the reaction. It becomes our reflex is to turn to Jesus. And that's when we discover how cool it is that he is with us always, even to the very end of the age. So I want to leave you with this thought just today, that is what we're doing and what we want to do together for the next 21 days. That this isn't just something that we can do by ourselves. And so most of the week we're all split off and going our own ways, but I encourage you to find somebody that wants to do this with you. It could be a parent, it could be a sibling, it could be a good friend, it could be somebody from church or your life group. But I would encourage you, find somebody who says, look, I want to do this first thing. So like text me in the morning, 8 a.m., set time. Hey, did you start your day with Jesus? Like, if not, do it now. Build up some accountability so that you have a framework that helps you plan it out. Like, when exactly in my day am I going to do this? Put it on your calendar if you use a calendar, right? But be as intentional as you can about planning out how this is going to work so that we can do exactly this and be successful by just adding a few simple disciplines to our life, because it is one of those things that will pay a huge, huge dividend when we have that set priority with Jesus. So we're starting off the new year with this new challenge, this new change, and it has got the power to change our whole year, and it's certainly got the power to change you and to change me. And frankly, I'm looking forward to it. I need it in my own life as well. So let me close out with just a word of prayer. Father, thank you so much that you have given us your Son. Thank you that you make it possible for us to change. Lord God, you have done this incredible work of sending your Son, of placing your Holy Spirit in our life. All this wasn't just so we could be forgiven. This was done so that we could become more and more the people you've made us to be, made in your very image. And Father, I pray for everyone just as we watch this now, Lord, that you would just inspire us, that you would remind us, that you would convict us, Lord, that we would set aside and own our own hostility, that we would just come to reconcile with you. First and foremost, that we can begin to discover, man, there's this freedom. My goodness, there's this love. My goodness, there's this joy. My goodness, there's this comfort, right? That comes from engaging with you, our incredible God who loves us so much. Father, guide our next steps and give us clarity on what each of us needs to do to stop nibbling on the table of this world, but to come so we can feast on you. We pray this now in your great name. Amen.
Are you hurting